Go inside the Crimson Tide with your hosts Rodney Orr and Gary Harris, keeping you informed on everything Alabama. Tider Insider TV, brought to you by Tuscaloosa Tourism and Sports.
The scouting report on me is I'm really hard to buy for, so I don't know if that's an excuse or if it's a reality. So I either get a sweater, socks, or you can guess what else.
And good evening, everybody, and welcome in to Tider Insider TV, brought to you by Tuscaloosa Tourism and Sports. Hope you had a very Merry Christmas. Alongside Rodney Orr from TiderInsider.com, I'm WVUA 23 Sports Director Gary Harris. You just heard from Alabama head coach Nick Saban about what he got for Christmas. As you can imagine, he probably is pretty hard to buy for. Rodney, when you make $11 million, is there really anything that anybody can get you? Plus, let's be honest. His focus, probably his Christmas gift, would be to follow up that recruiting class last Wednesday with a win in the Sugar Bowl this Saturday. Rod, that's where we're going to begin. Alabama and Big 12 champion Kansas State both arrived in New Orleans on Monday. This is some video from Alabama's arrival at Louis Armstrong International Airport on Monday morning. The Crimson Tide and the Wildcats will face off inside the Caesars Superdome at 11 a.m. Saturday morning. Make note of that early start time because of the college football playoff that afternoon and evening. Kansas State will be the home team, set up on the west sideline. Alabama is in the road, will be the road team. That means they'll be set up on the east sideline and wearing those white jerseys, which I love. Alabama has made 2 trips to the Sugar Bowl that were not part of the college football playoff, and unfortunately, Rod, as we remember, look at Nick Saban, 71 years old, still touching his toes. Alabama lost to Utah following the 2008 season after they went undefeated and lost to Florida in the SEC Championship game. Then, following the 2013 Kick 6 game in 2014 at the Sugar Bowl, Oklahoma, with Trevor Knight took the Tide down. So, Rod, let's discuss the Sugar Bowl. Alabama will be looking to, of course, change that recent history of not playing well when they didn't make it into the BCS or the college football playoff with this game against Kansas State, a good, physical, hard-nosed Kansas State team. We talked about it on my radio show this morning. They're not flashy, although, well, Deuce Vaughn's pretty flashy, but they do everything well. And they're going to be intense, and they're going to get after you. And we'll talk more about their personnel in a moment. But this is not a matchup that if you just were a casual football fan, you said Alabama versus Kansas State, mismatch. Not the case at all.
Yeah, no, Kansas State's a really good football team. There's a reason why they won the Big 12. They beat a playoff team, TCU. This is, like you said, you're a really well-schooled team. Their coach came from North Dakota State, one of the best programs, obviously, in the country in that division, that level of football, and he's done a tremendous job at Kansas State sustaining and building upon what they've done. And this is like you said, Gary, it's a motivated football team. They have an opportunity to play a team like Alabama. This is a big game for them.
All right, like I said, we'll get more into their personnel in a moment. From the Alabama perspective, you've got all your key players other than those that went into the portal that are playing in the game. Bryce Young, Will Anderson Jr., Jordan Battle, Brian Branch, Emil Ekiyor, all the defensive linemen. Really, everybody opted in. So that's great. Now I think it's important for Alabama to play well in this game, to break that trend, and also to make a statement that we just didn't show up, but we came to play. We came to make a statement.
Well, I think it reminds me a little bit of the couple of years ago when they played Michigan in the bowl game. A couple of players, I know Henry Ruggs, obviously Jerry Jeudy. Those were guys that you knew were leaving early. They played in the game, kind of like Will Anderson and Bryce Young in this game have made that decision. And I thought Alabama played really, really well, showed up in that particular game when people were saying, well, Michigan's highly motivated. I think this game kind of reminds me of that, Gary, as we start to head into it.
Yeah, and let's hear what Nick Saban has to say about it. It is time for Coach Talk. Crimson Tide head coach Nick Saban was asked about his team's focus going into the Sugar Bowl game and whether that's something that he can get a feel for ahead of the game. Coach Saban says it's not just getting a feel for his team, but also he needs to show his players how to handle the inevitable swings of momentum that will come in the game.
I watched a couple NFL games the last couple days. And I saw huge swings in momentum where one team would be dominating and then something happens, like the Dolphins game yesterday was a great example. So sometimes you're ready to play a game and you go out and execute very well, but you got to be able to recapture the momentum in the game when things don't go well. You got to be able to overcome adversity. So even though you may practice and prepare and start out really well, you've got to be able to maintain that intensity and that momentum for 60 minutes in the game, regardless of what happens in the game, whether things go well or something bad happens.
That's something he's always preached, Rodney, but it's more true today than it ever has been before because of players like this. There's a lot of big playmakers in college football, and Deuce Vaughn is one of them. Two-time All-American, 5'6" and 166 pounds, but in 3 seasons he's accounted for 4,751 total yards and 42 touchdowns. In fact, you said last week he reminds you of another former K-State great, Darren Sproles, who played in the NFL for like 15 years. If you've got the ability to make plays, and he certainly does, you can't look at his size. That doesn't matter. I mean, this kid is not only athletic and quick, he's tough too.
Well, you know, sometimes, Gary, his size plays to his favor because when he gets behind those linemen, you can't see him. And he's so quick, he darts. Watch him, watch. I mean, he's just so quick. Look at it, he's so elusive. He's a guy that ran for over 1,400 yards this year. Not only that, he's a really valuable receiver. He had over 40 receptions. They have 4 guys that had over 40 catches on this team. So they spread the ball around. I mean, obviously, Adrian Martinez, who started the season at quarterback, a really dynamic runner, had close to 700 yards rushing before he went down. Howard's a guy, Will Howard, that's come in and is more efficient as a passer. So, but they really can spread the ball around.
Yeah, and we may see Martinez, the other quarterback, as well. Rodney, their offensive line, too. This is a case, again, they're not recruiting a lot of 4- and 5-star guys. This is more like you used to see college football. They got a lot of redshirt juniors and seniors, maybe one sophomore, but that offensive line they've got is experienced. They've played a lot of football.
Blue collar, you kind of called it there early, Gary. They're just a really solid football team, well put together. Like some of the teams that you've seen coming out of that conference back in the 90s. You know, you had some really strong teams like Kansas State back in those days under Bill Snyder, Nebraska, the way they built those teams up front, developed the offensive linemen over time. So I agree with you. I mean, this is a really blue-collar team that doesn't make a lot of mistakes.
And defensively, their secondary is really good, and they're going to give Bryce Young some issues. And up front, Felix and Ozuma, their defensive end, can be a disruptor.
Yeah, again, the pass rush is something that Alabama's really going to have to, do well. You've got Tyler Steen, obviously J.C. Latham. Those guys have done a nice job this year for the most part. But, Bryce Young obviously going to have a lot of pressure on him, given the fact that, as you mentioned, this team can really put a lot of pressure up front defensively with their speed, their quickness, and that's really what they're built on.
Their head coach, Chris Kleiman, came to fame at North Dakota State. He's a Midwest guy. He's coached all of his football in states like Kansas and Iowa and North Dakota. And he is, as Rodney said, no nonsense, no frills. And he was asked about preparing for Alabama. He says it's key for his team to keep the focus on themselves and not worry about all those 5 stars that Alabama has.
It's all about what Kansas State does. It's about our preparation. It's about us detailing our work. It's about us making sure that we're attacking the process on a daily basis to get to Saturday and play this game. And so, everything, that we talk about is going to be in preparation to get to Saturday.
I like that approach. I think that's the way you have to approach it. Before we get to their 2 quarterbacks a little more in depth, what about the mindset, Rodney, that a lot of the people in the general public have that Kansas State's going to be more motivated? Normally, I might buy into that. But because the way this season's gone for Alabama and all the people that are questioning the program and questioning whether the dynasty is done, I think Alabama should be a very motivated football team in this game.
Look, I think there's different kinds of motivation. I mean, you look at Kansas State, they have an opportunity to play Alabama. This is a really big game for them, be a major win for their program. You look at Alabama, Gary, I think they're looking at it and saying, hey, listen, we didn't live up to expectations this year, but we could have quit. But you saw what happened against Ole Miss in the second half. We rallied. We won our last 3 games. We're on an up note. We want to finish strong. So I think motivation, both of them have it. It's just kind of different.
All right, let's get to the 2 quarterbacks because Alabama's going to have to prepare for both. Will Howard took over after Adrian Martinez got banged up. Martinez, the Nebraska transfer, is a gifted runner. He can bust it. I mean, he can take a play where there's nothing and you get a seam. You
Go
know,
80.
Yeah, he can take it 80 on you. And then you got Will Howard, who's a big, strong guy. I expect both of them to play in the game.
Yeah, well, you know, again, I'm telling you, Martinez, that's going to be really difficult, Gary, if he plays, because he is so dynamic, so elusive with the ball in his hands. And they're different. Howard's a guy that's a really efficient passer, big, strong kid. Watch him here. Did a really nice job in that Big 12 championship game. They had a chance to fold. He put together some really big drives. So guys that are different but extremely effective.
And, of course, last year in the bowl game, they tore up LSU. Now, that LSU team was decimated by opt-outs and didn't have its roster, but still, they
had a receiver play quarterback.
They did, but still, they're going to get fired up to play Alabama, that's for sure.
That's right.
All right, still to come on Tider Insider Television, Alabama football put the finishing touches on a star-studded signing class, and we'll tell you about the latest additions to the class of 2023. And we'll recap signing day overall. Some people are calling it the best recruiting class of the Nick Saban era. What? Are you kidding me? That's what they're saying. You know how good that must be. We'll discuss that coming up next. And we'll be getting your phone calls, emails, and tweets. As always, the phone number 205-348-WVUA. That's 348-9882. There's the email address. You could also tweet at us. Use the hashtag TITV. We'll be right back with the only show that takes you inside the Crimson Tide, the one, the only Tider Insider TV.
I'm just thinking about how myself situation go to the NFL and just a dynasty and winning.
My favorite thing is probably Coach Saban coaching the corners himself. You know, that means a lot to me to have a legend like that coach me.
You know, Coach Saban developed a lot of DBs, and Coach T-Rob, you know, he had J.C. Horn, first round, 8th overall pick. So with them two together, I feel like can't nobody compete development-wise.
You heard it. Time and again, this past Wednesday and Thursday, too, Coach Saban, Coach Saban, Coach Saban. I mean, he still has the magic touch when it comes to recruiting. Welcome back to TITV, brought to you by Tuscaloosa Tourism and Sports. Alongside Rodney Orr, I'm Gary Harris. And as I said, you just heard from some members of Alabama's football's top-ranked recruiting class. The early signing period last Wednesday, it began. Alabama signed 27 players and received another pickup on Thursday. And then another big one today from the portal, Rodney. Former Maryland tight end C.J. Dupree, number 18, announced that he'll transfer to Alabama. Dupree, who is originally from Pennsylvania, chose Alabama over the Ohio State Buckeyes. 6'5", 250-pound sophomore, caught 30 passes for 314 yards and 3 touchdowns for the Terps this season. His quarterback was former Alabama player Taulia Tagovailoa, to his younger brother. Of course, now Dupree will be playing for Alabama. Rodney, let's talk about this latest addition to the class. First of all, he's experienced. He's played in the Big Ten. He's big. He can big enough to inline block, but he's got some great skills in the pass receiving game. You know, you watch the Ohio State game where he had several big catches, a touchdown, leapt over a guy like Najee Harris used to do. I mean, this is a guy Alabama wanted a pass-catching tight end, and to find one that athletic, you know, I'm not saying he's Brock Bowers. Obviously, Brock Bowers is the best in the country. But size-wise, weight-wise, athleticism-wise, he is kind of that type of tight end.
Yeah, he is. A guy that, Gary, he can run the middle of the field, catch the ball really well, catches it in traffic, holds on the ball. He's physical. He can run after the catch. He can do all of those things. Guy that I think is going to be a really valuable weapon. And I'm kind of watching this video here, hoping we have that leaping play. But that was pretty incredible against Ohio State. He looked like Najee Harris leaping that defender. I think this may be it right here. Watch him go down the right sideline. But, yeah, you know, just extremely athletic, a guy that I think is going to be valuable as a receiver.
There it is. Wow. A hurdler. Yes, exciting. And, you know, they're bringing back Robbie Oots, Miles Kitzelman, Danny Lewis Jr., Amari Niblack. So an area where they wanted to strengthen up a little bit. They got a good group of tight ends to choose from next year.
They do, and I think some of those guys you mentioned are really developing. Niblack, certainly. Kitzelman's a young player, too, that they just brought in this last class. So I think they've got some guys. Danny Lewis is another one that you mentioned that's a young freshman from this past class. So those guys can certainly develop.
All right, let's get back to last week. 247 Sports Recruiting Calculator says it's Alabama's highest-rated class in the Nick Saban era. Now, that's saying something. So, well, there's Caleb Downs right there, incredible football player. Rodney, not much drama last Wednesday. Tony Mitchell, a little bit of noise on Tuesday night that he might flip to Auburn. He didn't. Then you saw Alabama picked up Smith and Rusall that afternoon out of Carver-Montgomery. Downs is at the top of the list. Who are some of the guys that you're watching for to make a fast impact in 2023?
Well, you're talking about Caleb Downs. You know, obviously he's a guy that I think can step in and play. immediately. He's got that kind of ability at safety with some of the guys departing. Helms is going, obviously Battle. I think Justice Haynes, even though the running back room is stacked, he's a guy that's going to be a tremendous player. Caden Proctor, the true freshman offensive tackle coming in from Des Moines, Iowa. He's another guy that I think certainly could. Listen, I think we talk about those defensive front people, Rousseau, James Smith, so forth and so on. And I think there's some guys, too, Gary, that maybe don't get quite the same publicity as some of the bigger guys. I really like Wilkin Formby, the local guy at right tackle, possibly starting out his career. I think he's got a lot of versatility. Eventually, I think he's going to be a really good player. All
right, man, what a class. Now you just got to get them here. A lot of them are already on campus. Get through next season. Keep them from getting in the portal. A lot of work still has to be done, but it looks good on paper. Coming up on TITV, we're going to be getting to your phone calls, emails, and tweets. The phone number, 205-348-9882. Go ahead and give us a ring, Tider Insider Nation. We want to hear from you next.
It's a good one to open with. I think it's the only one, I think, in the country tomorrow that's got two top 25 teams going at each other. So one of the better opening games for the SEC for sure.
Alabama men's basketball will finish the 2022 year ranked in the top 10, and the Crimson Tide opens the SEC schedule tomorrow night on the road in Starkville against Mississippi State. Rather open on the road this time of the year because there's no students on campus. Last couple of years, Alabama's had to open at home. The women play their SEC opener Thursday night at home against Georgia. They'll enter conference play with 9 straight wins, so SEC basketball conference schedule is here. And welcome back into TITV with Rodney Orr. I'm Gary Harris. We're going to jump out on the phone lines. First up is our pal Rent over in Brent. Good evening, Rick. How are you?
I'm fine. How are y'all tonight?
Doing great, Rick.
With Holden and Joe and Earl leaving, is that a sign that we're going to run the ball a lot more with Melrose being the quarterback?
I don't think so, Rick. I think it's a sign that both of those guys were worried about their playing time next year and a really, what I think is going to be a really talented wide receiver room. If Jalen Milroe wins the quarterback job, I'm sure they're going to tweak the offense to suit what he does. Ty Simpson and Holstein and Lonergan, the 2 freshmen, will battle too. But regardless of who the quarterback is, I think the wide receiver room is going to be really strong. And I don't think those guys left because they were worried Alabama running the football. I just think they were looking for more playing time.
Yeah, look, this is going to be a really talented, as you mentioned, wide receiver room. They're bringing in some really talented guys, Rick, guys that, bring a lot of speed. Malik Benson's the #1 junior college wide receiver and #1 overall player in the country in junior college. So really talented guy. Will Alabama run the ball more? I think they want to run it more effectively. Mm-hmm. I think they want to be able to run between the tackles, run with power, run when they want to run. So I do think that's going to be an emphasis, but I don't right now. I think it's a long way off in terms of who's going to be the quarterback.
All right, thanks, Rick, for the phone call. Let's get to BT right here in Tuscaloosa. Hey, BT.
How you doing, Gary, Ronnie?
Doing great, buddy. What you got?
What I want to ask Gary, Ronnie, is that what we need to do in the bowl game, Gary, we need to focus on our team, not worry about Kansas State and play ball.
Yeah, BT, I think you're 100% right. I think the focus needs to be on being Alabama. If you're the best version of Alabama, nothing against Kansas State, they're a good team. But if you're the best version of Alabama, Rodney, I think you win the game.
Well, I think so. I think, too, this team, we saw it all throughout the year, the issues they had, the consistency, the lack of discipline. You can't, BT, go into a game like this with this team because they're playing a team that doesn't make a lot of mistakes, so you certainly can't afford to make them.
All right, thanks for the phone calls. Our email of the day is coming up, and we can try to squeeze in another phone call, too, 205-348-9882. We'll be right back after this. And we're back here on Tider Insider Television, the Sugar Bowl preview edition. Let's get to our email question of the day, brought to you by KDM Service Corporation. When it comes to all your heating and air conditioning needs, KDM Service Corporation serves your family like our family. Here it is from Joseph in Tuscaloosa. Will Alabama's uniforms be white or crimson? Talking about the jerseys in Saturday's Sugar Bowl. We already let the hat out of the bag a little bit. Alabama is the visiting team, Rod, so they will be wearing their white jerseys. Listen, I love Alabama's uniform. It's one of the classic uniforms, one of the few that are left in college football. But I love those road whites.
I do, too. You know, I was trying to think in the Superdome, when has Alabama last worn their white? I'm thinking 92 when they played Tulane down there in the regular season. It's been the crimson So that's the only time I remember. No, wait a minute. Clemson, remember?
That's right. Yeah, Clemson was ranked number 1 in playoff, and Alabama beat them. Yeah, so.
Right.
All right, Stu, what'd you say we have next? I missed you. All right, we got an email from Jimmy in Nashville. Rod, will Alabama sign a transfer portal quarterback? Great question. Rod, I guess anything is possible, and I'll let you expand. My gut feeling is no, but we will see.
I mean, I guess it depends on who goes in the portal. I've seen some good ones go in that Alabama didn't flirt with. A lot of talk about Drake May. He made a statement he's staying at North Carolina. I think, look, I think Ty Simpson, I think Milrose, obviously a tremendous athlete. You've mentioned the 2 freshmen. But, listen, I'd like to see them develop what they have. Because I think some of these guys, and again, Simpson and Milrose, certainly have the talent. Gary, it's an opportunity. And they've got to take advantage of that. But I would say right now, I think they're going to go with the guys they have.
All right, we're going to get Leslie and Helena in with an email, Rod, and then we're going to get to the break. Is Jahmyr Gibbs going to the NFL? Another great question. The running back transfer from Georgia Tech had a good year. Rod, my gut feeling is, just a gut feeling, nobody's told me anything. I think he's probably going to move on to the National Football League draft, but I don't know that. What are you hearing?
No, I would agree with you. And again, don't know that. Just speculating, asking a question, so we'll speculate. And I think Gibbs is probably going. I don't know that he has a lot to prove, Gary.
I don't know. He's played great at Georgia Tech, played great at Alabama. Well, still to come, we'll make our predictions for Saturday's Sugar Bowl down in New Orleans on a beautiful, cold and crisp night. We've had a few of those lately. Although it's going to be warming up later this week. That's good news. We'll be back with picks right after this. All right, it's prediction time. Rodney, as always, we let you lead off.
Well, you know, I said earlier, Gary, I kind of compared it to the Michigan game a couple of years ago. I really think it's going to be that kind of game. I think, obviously, Kansas State's a really good team, but I think Alabama's going to play well. I think they're going to win the game, 31-24.
Yeah, I think they're going to play well, too. And, of course, you know, I picked horrible this year, so I hope I don't put the kiss of death on Alabama. But I think this offense is going to hit on all cylinders. I mean, I think Bill O'Brien has been criticized unfairly. I think he's going to open it up with Bryce, and what I think is Bryce's final game. I think they're going to have the playmakers ready to go. And I think Alabama hangs a lot of points on Kansas State. How about that? 45-28. We'll see on Saturday. And a reminder, WVUA 23 Sports will be in the Big Easy beginning tomorrow. Coverage every night this week at 5, 6, and 10 on WVUA 23 News. For Rodney Orr, I'm Gary Harris. Thanks for watching TITV. We'll see you again next week.